Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast. How are you? I hope you're doing very, very well. In this slot, we were going to do, in this Arne slot, we were going to do a Martinelli scouted episode, but George is unfortunately unavailable. He's got some big work deadlines coming up. We always forget George is like a PhD student doing some mad research on like children's health, which is
PhDs are very... They are very demanding as well. PhDs are very demanding because it's like you've got to find a niche within whatever subject area you're looking into, and then you've got to do literature review, then you've got to do testing depending on what sector you're in. Yeah,
if you had to do a PhD and it can't be on Thiago Motta's thesis, although we're going on to something else today, what would it be?
I was like very, very anti PhD. I could never do it. But if I had... It'd probably be on football for sure, because I wouldn't do it on engineering because engineering sucks. Although I'm not too bad at it. I'm like decent. Do you know? I'm kind of diverting here. I always think in life, right? If you're decent at something, you can get through. Like you can get through and you can make a good living. Yeah. Back to this now. This now. No, generally, like for example, I got a first class degree in engineering, a master's, but I'll tell you, no, I'm not great. Just as long as you are, though. I don't think so.
You guys have proper jobs. I'm sat here, playing. I've spent the entire afternoon learning "Viva La Vida" by Coldplay.
You were cooking. I'm cooking
PhD
wise, I'd probably do something on. I'll probably try and study the behaviour of how the opposition reacts to different things. That is so nerdy, isn't it?
No, you're good. And it works for today. Because we're doing a Q&A, and then we're going to look at 2 clips of Miguel Molina talking about. There is like a wider lecture he did, right? But I think you have to pay to get it or whatever. Yeah. But there's some sort of clips and stuff going around, there's a lot to look at already in there. So we're going to have a look at those at the end of this, which will just be for patrons and YouTube members. We're going to do a bit of a Q&A, and then we're going to sort of pause halfway through and then flip over to YouTube and Patreon member side. If you want to come over, want to have a look at it, if you want to see Rohan and I nerd out about Miguel Molina, then be our guest. But we are starting with a bit of a Q&A. We've asked you questions on Patreon, on YouTube, on X, and so on. Let's just get cracking, baby.
Isn't it? It's always like one of the things. It's a pastime, isn't it, for content creation?
If you need content ideas, just ask the audience. Easy. Do you want to go first? I think you're on X and YouTube. You're not. Go for it.
Sir, I shall go first. I'll go to YouTube, and it's from @SRS1918, and he asks, if you have time, well, yeah, we do have time, does Merino or Rice start in the left midfield position after the break? Thoughts, Alexander? Forest, 3 o'clock. No, actually, so it will be 1:45 because the team news is given an hour and 15 minutes now before kickoff. So what do you want to see?
I would love to see a Rice, Merino, Ødegaard midfield. I'm probably surprised no one by saying that, and I want Rice deeper. No need to overcomplicate. I saw some numbers in that group chat we were in today about Thomas Partey and sort of us performing with Thomas Partey, and some of the underlying numbers with and without him aren't as impressive as you might think. And yeah, I think it's strange because Partey has an argument. I think you always say post Atalanta to have been one of the best performers of this. Maybe our best midfielder. You could certainly make an argument that he's been our best midfielder so far this season. But I still think for balance sake, I would go Rice, Merino, Ødegaard, just for the spaces that Merino can occupy. I think Merino is much better between the lines than people think. I think the less Merino is on the ball in a weird way, the more sort of he's facilitating, he's one touch in and out, moving out of spaces, learning the sort of the out of possession side of things. I think the better, and the more Rice is facing play and the more Ødegaard is on the ball. It just feels like the most. But also we say this, and we've always talked about this, but we haven't actually seen it in practice. And, it may well be that we get there against Forest and we watch it and we go, oh, this isn't working because of X, Y, and Z. But on paper, that feels right.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. I think when we're looking at it, and I always use that post-Atalanta reference as a way of looking at Thomas Partey's season, because I think his level of performance since that day has been phenomenal. And I've kind of attributed, well, I've looked at it and have felt that it's close to the 22-23 season of Thomas Partey that we have witnessed in many games since that. And that's where I think people would potentially disagree with us, because if you go by performances in general this season, he has been our best midfielder. And I can understand the argument, but as you alluded to, I think the balance of the team and the way that we can kind of platform our main assets, and what I mean by that is Declan Rice, our £100 million signing. I believe that the best way in which this team is able to click and is going to give us longevity is by Declan Rice being in his best position. And for me, that is in defensive midfield role nominally, or, how we set up in possession is that when we are in our pivot, Declan Rice, therefore, will be on the right side of the pivot as opposed to the left. And I just think he sees the game way better on that side. And I think the big argument that
I think he opens his body out as well better in terms of passing across his body. That way I much prefer it.
In terms of like the switches potentially as well. I hear that as well. And I just think that there's this team, in terms of its security as well, off the ball, will be better off with Declan Rice there. Now, I think the argument for Declan Rice playing further forward in that left central midfield role, I think that's more down to the level of quality he gives you in the press, and how the left central midfield role, for me, is the most complex in the team. And Mikel Merino, I believe, can do that. And he showed glimpses that he can do that as well. He's had other games which I thought he's been quite overwhelmed with it, and he's still learning, and it's going to take him time. But I feel that the way in which Mikel Merino, what he gives us in possession relative to Declan Rice, I think it's chalk and cheese for the left-hand side. And I just think there's a serious level of potential there. And actually, I know we've not seen Rice, Ødegaard, and Merino together as a trio in the Premier League so far, but we saw a glimpse of it against Liverpool in terms of Rice and Merino being there. And I know there's a stat going around about Arsenal, in terms of going long at goal kicks and being the most in the league this season so far. I think there's a lot of context there. I think there's caveats to look at in terms of injuries and red cards. But at the same time, going long is a staple. Those two, they're not mutually exclusive. They both can happen. But in that Liverpool game, if you remember, we played through pressure many times in that first half, and it was through Declan Rice, Mikel Merino as well, as you alluded to with his security. I'm sorry to go on a bit too much. But the other thing I want to know about Mikel Merino is that there's a clear idea with him in that left centre mid role. Now, if you look at the games he's played this season so far, whether you think he's performed good or bad, it's up to you. But if you look at a lot of the games he's featured in, he's almost scored in every single one. There is a clear idea with him. Like, you go back to the Liverpool game, he should have scored 2. He missed a big chance before he managed to get the one that he did. Chelsea, he was agonisingly close to getting on the end of that Saka cross from the half space. Newcastle, he was close. Preston, he was close. Bournemouth, he was close. So I think that I'm really excited by this, because I think what we're going to see, this is my prediction, I think we're going to see, how with Kevin De Bruyne and Trent, in terms of that right half space, when they receive it, they don't even look. They'll play that cross towards the far side for a tap-in. They'll always do it. It's just automatic. I think what you're going to see with Arsenal, with Mikel Merino, is when we find a situation where Saka can come inside, he's not even going to think. He's going to look to play that cross towards the far post, and Mikel Merino is going to be there to gamble. Yeah. So,
I think the back post will be huge for him. I think also, I can hear the Partey Defence League guys coming at us in the car. Actually, I don't know how many people I don't know how many Partey Defence League guys will be on watching the Cannon podcast, but there are people who are very much for him. And the analogy I would use, weirdly, is like the Mbappe thing at Madrid. No one's suggesting Mbappe's a bad player. It's about the fit, isn't it? It's about the balance of the forward areas. And obviously Madrid look different and things aren't quite working. It's pushed Bellingham out and whatever. No one's, obviously Mbappe's one of the best players in the world. No one's saying that. But the reason he doesn't play sometimes is because of the balance. And I think with our other midfielders, I think it makes the most sense. I do really feel that. I also think on Merino will really benefit from having someone who can receive high up. Yeah. I think with Rice in that pocket, he just he doesn't have the same sort of mobility. And I will go back to it as well on your point about being deeper and on the left for Rice in terms of those sort of switch passes. I think that'll be another thing, helping us get up the pitch a little bit quicker, finding Saka in space. Is an important thing. Actually, something Miguel Molina talks about a little bit in terms of finding those diagonals when they're in the short counter attacks, etc., etc. Like that really putting a player where they can deliver a ball they're really good at. And
Yes.
the version the thing I'd sort of compare it to is Ben White. Ben White, I think, is brilliant crossing across his body. So whenever he comes inside and he shoots across his ball, the best balls I can remember Ben White playing are to the left, across his body, whereas Rice is much better for me going out, still using his right, but to the right of the pitch, if that makes sense, when he's still facing play, shooting sort of open across his body, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's funny how players have like passes that you can kind of envision them doing. But I think that will be a big thing for Rice, and I think it just feels cramped to me in that top area. And like you can argue the case for Partey on an individual basis, but there's almost a case for like moving Partey just because it helps Rice. Do you know what I mean? Like even ignoring the balance thing, you could just say Rice hasn't thrived there, and therefore and who do you want to maximise? And Partey defensively, guys might say Partey, but I just think if you put Rice there, give him a run of games. I think we might look back at some point and go, can you remember when Declan Rice played the whole game?
Yeah. Do you think it could be like, last season when we look at the evolution of the team in reference to Kai Havertz, where he's playing, predominantly in the left mid role, and then 2024, and then he went to centre forward, and then initially people are saying, oh, he can't play centre forward, and then the narrative changed, and now it's changed back again because he's not necessarily played there. But maybe this could be a reference point of Declan Rice where he's given the opportunity to be there. And I'm adamant that is the idea, because otherwise, what was the point in signing Mikel Merino? Like, what was the point?
Surely.
So,
I also think you sort of referenced it earlier, but I'm having this sort of not really. I don't really have spats on X particularly, but one that I recall, of one basically being like, "Why don't we just keep it simple with the left centre mid slot?" And I'm like, it's arguably the most complicated role in our system.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I wish we could keep it simple, but like the stuff Rice does in terms of the dual responsibility, in terms of triggering in terms of where, especially when we go over to the right. I think there was that graph that came out about like where we give spaces, and on the right it's just there's nothing. And especially when we go over to the right and press teams on with White and Saka and stuff, like what the left central midfielder has to do in terms of where they're running, who they're occupying, like that stuff is really not simple. And then you go into the block and sort of what your responsibilities are there. There's so much to learn. I'm willing to give, especially someone in that role, especially someone who's been injured, especially someone who's new to the country this time, if that makes sense, and new to Premier League football in sort of recent terms. I'm willing to give him time. Like, I'm not going to panic 100%. About Merino until March, April, May.
100%. And just to end on this, like, if you go back to that Athletic article when they're looking at they're interviewing analysts and Premier League coaches who weren't obviously named for whatever reason. One of them said how the left centre mid role, he was alluding to how complex it is, and that's why Declan Rice is doing it, because of his vast quality out of possession and being able to jump between different players, the frame that he possesses. And that's why I think Mikel Merino, I want to give him so much time and a level of continuity in the team now, because I can just see this left-hand side clicking with him, Calafiori and Martinelli, and we can kind of replicate close to the 22-23 season that we saw.
He's a nice guy as well.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah. Do you know what? I'll tell you what, his celebration, it just hits. Like, he does, because I think his dad, when he was playing, he'd do that kind of like run around the corner flag and then you just like roar. It slaps. I was watching that goal back, the Liverpool goal, and it's just,
If we won, that would have, that would have helped. Let's go to Patreon. Let's change gears slightly in terms of it's quite a tactical question. This one is from Franco SKR on the Discord, who says, thoughts on a potential Arda Güler loan in January?
I've not watched loads, but I'll tell you what, from what I have seen, you're looking at that right half space as well, man. And that half space cross towards the back post, he has it a lot. He's crazy. And
I think, not to be hypocrites, he's not what we need.
No.
Like, if we're going to talk about balance for Thomas Partey, like in terms of the balance of the squad, it's not what we need.
Yeah, no, I hear that. But we are a bit light, though, in terms of that.
But I don't think we're light in terms of those. Like, it should be Ødegaard. Is my point. Like, that's the role he plays in someone who can do that, who can. I think he's a bit more of a goal threat than Ødegaard. But that should be Ødegaard, and like I'd want a different type of midfield. Maybe someone who is a bit more between the lines, but then someone who, I don't know, is I don't know, taller or so just someone who's just like profile. Like I think he's basically he'd be doing what Odegaard does essentially.
There's also the fact that we do have Ethan Wanyeri as well.
And that's
that's a massive one as well, isn't it? And I've got a strong feeling. I think Arteta is gonna. I think he's serious on Ethan, despite the frustration. And we mentioned it in the main point. I think he's serious on Ethan. And I won't be surprised in which very soon he'll become like a mainstay in, not necessarily he's going to start every game, but a mainstay in terms of coming on, playing significant minutes in the Premier League. And yeah, and we know Arteta likes to work with smaller squads as well. So yeah, but baller, absolute baller.
Oh yeah, I mean, very good, very good.
Yeah.
You give us a question, please, Rohan.
Right. Hold on, bear with me. As the silence continues.
Okay,
this is a good one.
If this was TCB Live, I would be mocking you.
I have gone slightly on Discord, to be fair, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
It's from Chef Curry 07.
Okay.
Cooking with the name. What centre back can we get to replace Saliba if he leaves to Real Madrid this summer? Oh, that's a hard one. You can't replace him, that's for sure. But
what centre back can we get to replace it? So, okay, here's a rogue shout. I really liked Ben White at centre back.
Okay.
And I think we would need a centre back, but could there be a bit of a rejigging? I don't know. I think when you have Saliba, you work from there. He's like your base. Yeah. And sometimes when you have an opportunity, say, I'd probably say, in terms of the other players in our squad, like Rice, Odegaard, Saliba, and Saka, if any one of those left, you have an opportunity to remodel your whole area of that pitch. Like it's kind of all working around them. So there could be an opportunity to remodel things and kind of go a different direction, maybe go with more of a proper over, a Frimpong type right back and sort of change things and how that all works. If we were going for a direct replacement, I don't think you can do that. I mean, I look at Ousmane Diomande. That's probably the obvious name. To be honest, I'm not going to sit here and give you 100 names, but that's probably the one that would stand out to me.
The one I did like, and we played against them last season at Lens, Kevin Danso. I did like him.
Yeah,
now again, he was good.
Yeah.
He looked good. I mean, I think I can really remember how good he was though now. It was such a long time ago I watched it.
That was a while ago,
But because this was before we were linked to Calafiori, and I was kind of like looking at potential central centre-back depth options for Saliba, and I looked at him and I thought, he looks like a player who could fit that mould. But now Calafiori, I stand by. I think Calafiori's got real potential playing in that role as central centre-back. But yeah, I like Kevin Danso. I feel there's a lot of really good centre-backs out there in Europe, but the reality is that you're not going to be able to mitigate the loss entirely of someone like Saliba. Especially the way that we play. Yeah.
He's the bedrock. Yeah. And someone like that might quicken up the process for a Calafiori to move in, but then you ask yourself, do you want a different type of centre-back profile to be alongside him? Do you want to go 3? I think for me, it will be less, how do you replace Saliba, and more, how do we evolve the team past that? Because it's not possible to. It's like saying, how do you replace it? Well, we haven't with Odegaard. So we literally didn't. So yeah, I think that's more my angle with that.
Yeah.
I'll come to a question then. Did I say? I haven't done a Patreon one yet, have I?
You haven't.
Here we go. Ricky on the Patreon says, there's 3 questions. We can choose whichever one you like. How do the first team coaches decide whether a youth player is ready to play for the first team? And then how do they decide when they are ready for minutes? What is the most fulfilling part of your job? Presumably he means us. And who is the best non-Arsenal U21 young player you've seen live in the past 3 years? Were you blown away by their performance or quality? For some reason, just on that last one, I know I shouldn't say it, but Mikey Moore at Spurs.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness me.
Yeah.
I watched him, he's in the Europa League. He just absolutely burns about 6 players. It's mad. It's mad. Okay, how
Ooh,
do the first team
okay.
coaches decide whether a youth player is ready to play for the first team, and then how do they decide when they're ready for minutes? I mean, this
That's
is
a
obviously
hard
going to be
question. That is so hard.
I mean, this is something you need to ask them, but like I would guess it would be you need to develop some kind of protocol of being like, okay, physically, how are they handling things in training?
Yeah.
How's their body responding? That's one of the things you don't want to put someone's body on the line. Forget the mental side of things. I will always say this whole thing about when people say, oh, but if you throw a young player in too early, you could ruin their career. I'm sorry. I always say this, if you have a bad 10 minutes and you can't handle that, that tells me you weren't ready for the first team in the first place. So on the mental side of things, you have to be, of course, mature enough to handle all the attention that comes with it. But in terms of the football development side, I think if you're good enough, you're old enough. For me, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a piece of string question. I don't know.
The way I look at it is, and it might be quite broad, but I believe that when a player is not learning anything from playing academy football minutes, that is the time to move him out of that environment, whether that's on a loan elsewhere in which he can gain significant experience playing men's first team football, or whether you integrate him in the Carabao Cup and give him minutes here and there. I think that's the best place in which that's when you make that decision. I remember Mertesacker when he did I think it was an interview a few years ago, and it was about this. Like, when do you recognize when an academy player is ready to make that step up? And it was like, well, when we watch him, when we watch that player and we see their performances in the games in the academy, and if they're not learning anything else and they're just consistently outperforming everyone else, then what is he really learning at that stage? He's not learning much. So then take him out of that environment. And then it's also down on, and we'll probably get into it, and because the Miguel Molina clips, there are 2 clips there, but I want to talk a little bit about other things that he mentioned that people might not be aware of. And one of them was tactical periodization. And it's just having so many different ideas and methodologies that you need to implement, and they optimize it at training level. And it's like short but intense training sessions. They will need to be able to do that. They need to be able to consistently perform in that sort of environment as well in training before they're then thrown into the deep end. I think maybe that's why we don't necessarily. Maybe that's why we're not too quick with Ethan. Potentially, maybe that level, that difference in training. I don't know, but
I think there's trust as well. Something that the managers always talk about is like whenever he talks about young players, he talks about look how much they're passing in the ball. Like they trust him to go and create sort of solutions for the team. I will say, I think the conversation we had with Marcia on the podcast, as in Miles's mum, kind of opened up a little bit for me in terms of like, you never want there to be favourites, but I think it was pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear for everyone. You could go through the academy and go, okay, we all knew about Ethan a couple of years ago. We all knew about Miles a couple of years ago. I don't want to talk about these players particularly, but we all know about the other players. You could name them. We all know who they are. I'm not going to go near that. There's always those sorts of players. So to some degree, I think there are some players who are just on this path where they're so good that they're going to get there, and it's just a case of when. And so I don't think that's less of a case of like, how do we decide? That's just like, it's going to happen, and it's just about the sort of right sort of time. And I suppose with other players, there's more of a, okay, I guess why not? Why can't they play first team? And if you end up answering the question with, because I don't think they're good enough, then you need to think about something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think I don't know. I think there's very few players, I suppose, my point, who can play first team. So I think I guess my feeling would be, and I'd be interested to hear like Permit Asaka and the guys who work there. My feeling would be basically assume the academy's job on the surface is to prepare players for the first team, but that's not what you're doing really. You're developing young players. You're developing because look at your outcomes. That's not what you're really doing in the end. There's some players, and they kind of are on their own special track. But most players, you're developing a competitive environment. You're working on their strengths and weaknesses, and you're saying, how can I give you a career in football? And then you're going to get, at Arsenal, some players who come through and you say, wow, you can play first team. And then we need to have the conversation about how does this work and how do we put you in or whatever. But I think this idea that, we're all going to be, you're not. And we all know from U12 level, we all know there's some players.
There's always like, I always look at it as you have like a pool of talent, and anyone who's playing right now in the academy for a Premier League side is at an incredible level, but then you have like the anomalies. You have the anomalies who just stand out. And it's like like you go through the years of Arsenal's academy, and it's not even 1 in 10, 11, 12 who make it here. It's not, and that's okay. And this is why I think it depends on. I think it depends on a magnitude of different things. Where you have to look at the level the club is at right now in terms of, are they competing for a title as we are now? Are they competing for top 4? Are they competing for simply a European place? That can also dictate how quickly someone can be integrated. Whereas, like in Arsenal's case, if they're competing for the top honours, it's going to be a lot more difficult for these guys, even if they're anomalies, to be able to come into the team and be able to deliver that impact, because maybe there isn't that level of trust to throw them into that deep end yet, and also maybe the potential consequences of doing that as well. But I think in terms of when we look a bit broader and we look at just men's first team football as a whole, I think, and this is something Arsenal should be doing better, is when a player is just ready to play men's first football, just throw them out on loan and just allow them to develop, to have that exposure. Because, like I said, if I don't understand the idea of, if a player is not learning anything else for U21s, U23s, whatever it is, okay, that's good. Then that doesn't mean just because they can't get into the Arsenal setup right now, they stay there and they're stagnating. Throw them out elsewhere in which they can actually gain some exposure and learn through adversity, because it's always hard, isn't it, if you're a youngster from the academy,
and so you can sell them as well. Like there's an asset aspect to that.
It's got to be a revenue source.
Yeah, there is. When you accept, how are you going to treat Chido Obi the same as the other strikers in your academy? You're just not. Like you aren't. Exactly. Sorry, it's not fair, but sorry. So yeah, I think there are just special cases, and then you say, okay, then how can we slot you in? But Yuka Miles, he's being used at left back and stuff. There's always going to be use cases. Yeah. I think talent has to just. It's like you can't stop that talent now. Let's do one more before we leave you on YouTube.
Do you want to go for it, or should I go for it?
You go for it, darling.
Okay. And I know I said something before going live, but I want to throw another question about this topic that I was irritated about previously.
Okay.
So it's from Charlie Davey on Twitter, on X. I watched the scouted vid of Gyökeres in the summer and was wondering if your opinion has changed on him since then. I prefer Isak, but Gyökeres' numbers are out of this world. And I know we kind of touched on it in the main pod, but I mean, since we spoke, I think he scored another 4 goals. For, I don't know who they played against, but yeah, he scored 4. Thoughts? And again, I can't really comment too much on this because I don't know him very well.
I think what's funny and what is kind of the lie of a lot of football content creation is people will speak so securely on a player and be like, this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, one, not a professional scout. You're a fan. That's what you are. So already you're not seeing things that professional scouts are seeing.
Yeah.
2, full disclosure, I'd seen Gyökeres a couple of times in the Champions League before watching him for Scouted in the summer. Since then, haven't thought about it much, and I've watched him in 2 Champions League games. That is nowhere near enough to form a properly informed opinion. So I'm just gonna give you that baseline. But when I have watched him, my feeling is I don't love him outside the box. That's what I've said before. But also, but the lesson I learned from Gyökeres is what are people's eyes attracted to? They're attracted to the bully in him, aren't they? They're attracted to the bagsman, the goal man, the goal man. And then there's a better way of phrasing that. And then there's a conversation
gunman,
around that.
Isn't it? It's gunman, isn't it?
The gunman, not the goal man. Yeah. And then that's the conversation to me. I look at the goal. I imagine the goals that Gyökeres has scored, and in my head, they're all transitional. They're all running with a lot of space. They're all balls over the top and that sort of stuff. I can't see him getting that space at Arsenal. But then how many bullies are there out there? How many can he develop his game? Can he go beyond that? That's the stuff that I can't as a fan answer. But what I will say is that I suppose my analysis is it leads me to going, what hole are we trying to fill? What are we trying to do with the Gyökeres signing? Yeah. There's something there. There's a kind of there's a bully. There's an aggression in his play. There's a kind of there's even something in the branding of the Gyökeres, the celebration Swedish, as well, and that stuff. Like there's something in that we're all pining for. I think that doesn't then automatically make it the right thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Celebration is cold, though, isn't it?
It is cold.
It is a cold celebration. It's
that?
like
Sorry?
that. It's like that.
Oh, that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. It is cold. For that, we shall
Please
drink.
don't screenshot that. Thoughts?
God. I mean, again, I've barely watched him, but I guess one of his trade. Okay, yeah, elite ball striking, turning radius, half space crossing.
Yeah, between the lines.
Yeah. I'm even forgetting that as well. But I think if maybe there is a good argument of if Arsenal need extra clinicality in box situations and ball striking. Judging from what I've seen, the little I've seen of him, he certainly has that, hasn't he? And it's a case of like, how much would you be willing to spend for that specific attribute and that aspect? And what implications does that have on other players? I mean, at the end of the day, we do need forwards. You know, let's have a look at some of the options that we have. You know, and it's not the most inspiring, is it? So, but I don't know, mate. I genuinely don't know. But I'm interested to see next week because we do play them. We play them on the Tuesday. So,
well, I think what will be curious is how Mikel sets up against him. I think often there's this whole thing of like, whenever sometimes we'll be playing people and I'm like, I know Mikel thinks they are crap just because of the way we're playing. Like, we're leaving Saliba one-on-one with the striker. We're like properly pressing onto them. We're like shutting down every lane. Like, we're really going for them. And I'm like, I know. Like Southampton, I was like, he thinks you're like, okay, you know, respect to you for what you're doing, but he thinks you are crap. This is
the thing. Like, so it did send shockwaves, his hat trick against Man City, regardless of how it was. It is a hat trick, isn't it? You know, it's a hat trick.
And it's confidence, and that's an aspect of the game.
And that's against Man City, isn't it, as well? So that would have sent shockwaves. Obviously, the output that he's been getting on international duty as well. We'll be looking at that, and it will be very interesting to see how we do set up with him. I think the way we set up is quite consistent. Regardless of who we play, where we'll look to keep two centre-backs on the striker, and we'll go 1v1 when we need to. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in those moments in which, you know, Gyökeres has space, he's isolated Saliba or Gabriel. What does he do in that situation? You know?
Yeah. We'll leave you there on YouTube if you're watching us for free. If you want to sign up and watch Mikel Rohan talk about Miguel Molina, then and me, I'll be there. Then feel free. You can sign up for free on Patreon for a 7-day free trial. But if not, thanks for watching and peace. Thanks for keeping Arsenal. That's the sign off. Hi, patrons and YouTube members.